Hello, and today I'm going to show you how to make the cookie dough bites. So this is going to be a pre-recorded demo just so we can stop and talk about things as we go and to keep it within the 30-minute time limit that we have for class. So before I show you how to make the cookie dough bites, I do want to show you where to find the recipe. So if you go into your Schoology, all right, under week number 1, so let me just go back here. So this is our Schoology page, as you recall, and we press on week number 1. All right. And your cookie dough bite recipe is right here. It's linked. Okay. So if you press on that, you can make a copy if you want. You don't need to because it is accessible for you on Schoology, but if you want to make a copy, you can for your own personal use. So you just go to File, make a copy, but you're not submitting this. The only thing you would submit is if you were to make these cookie dough bites, you would submit that image of yourself on the 1.1 document. So if you do this lab, you would be submitting a photo here. But just again, that is not required. You do not need to do it. All right. If you don't want, it's totally up to you. If you do it, don't forget you get entered in a drawing. All right. So before we get started on our recipe, making it, let me just explain a couple of things. So the title of the recipe is always at the top. The yield is how much the recipe makes. All right. So the yield, for this, it makes about 30 cookie dough bite balls, spheres. So they're just bite-sized little yummy cookie dough bites. Okay. So you'll have about 30 of them. Sometimes the recipe says it makes 1 dozen. That would mean 12. Sometimes it makes a portion of 1. So yield is essentially how many portions of whatever it is that you're making. All right. With that, we have our ingredients on the left-hand side with the amounts of each ingredient. All right. Dry and liquid, which we'll talk about. And then on the right-hand side, we have our directions. All right. At the bottom, there's tips and tricks, etc. All right. So that is what we have. Down here, you can just ignore that was for the school year. So you're just following along with the actual recipe. All right, so let's get started. So in our recipe, the first ingredient is butter. So butter it adds flavor and richness to baked products. So you can use any brand. You can use butter or margarine. So margarine is typically cheaper. And butter's a little bit more expensive. And honestly, in a recipe like this, it doesn't matter. So I'm using margarine. So when you buy these in the grocery store, this is a pound of margarine, or it's the same thing for butter. And then it comes as sticks. All right. So our recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of butter. All right. So 1 stick of butter, and you can see it, it's hard to see it with the light, is equal to a 1/2 cup. All right. So 1 of these is a 1/2 cup. So you only need a 1/4 cup. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut that in half. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tablespoons is in this stick, which is a 1/2 cup. And we need a 1/4 cup, which is going to be 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take a butter knife and I'm just going to cut it. All right. So what I'm going to do before we actually make our recipe is I am going to gather what's called our mise en place. So everyone say that word with me, mise en place. All right. So mise en place is a word that means prep everything ahead of time, pre-measure. All right. So I have pre-measured our fat, which plays a really yummy role, flavor and richness. All right. In our recipe. So I'm going to just set this aside in a little prep cup. All right. So when we do mix it, everything's prepped. So typically, if you were to take a culinary class at Leiden, we're not rushing you. We have a mise en place day, which would be like day 1 of the lab. And then the next day you would come in and you would make the lab to focus on the technique. So in no way we don't want to rush anyone. We want you to, number 1, make a good product. And number 2, take something away with you that's actually quality. So rushing you would do nothing of the sort other than move fast, and We want you to move quickly, but we also want you to learn. So I'm going to show you how to mise en place first. All right, the next ingredient that we are going to measure are our sugars. So if you recall, there's lots of different types of sugars, and in this recipe, we're using 2 different kinds. The first one we're going to use is our granulated sugar. So this is probably the most common sugar. You've probably seen this before. And then the other kind of sugar is our brown sugar. All right. So brown sugar is white sugar with an ingredient called molasses, which is a refined sugar. It's mixed in. So it gives it a little bit more, this helps with more brownness and color. If we were actually baking these cookie dough bites are not baked. But the combination of the 2 sugars just adds for a delicious baked product. Okay. And the amount that we are using of our sugars is 2 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons. All right. So here are our measuring spoons. All right. So tablespoon is big T. All right. So we definitely need that. And then we need 2 teaspoons, which is TSP. All right. And this is just a standard set. All right. So these are the 2 spoons we're going to be using. I still have left a ½ teaspoon. All right. And a ¼ teaspoon. I'm not going to use those for this specific measurement, but they are available. All right. So for white sugar, this is very easy because you literally are going to measure 1 tablespoon. I'm just using a butter knife to kind of straighten it off. So 1 tablespoon. Let me move this over so it's easier to see. And then I need my 2nd tablespoon. Okay. And then I also, it says 2 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons. All right. So the idea of this recipe is to get you just to learn how to measure. So 1, 2. So that's why we're having you use so many different increments. All right. So our white sugar is prepped. All right. Next, I'm going to measure my brown sugar. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, you just showed us how to do the white sugar. Isn't it the same? It's not. So because brown sugar is white sugar with that ingredient called molasses added, molasses is a thick syrup. As I said, it's a refined sugar, and it really helps with texture in a baked recipe. So this sugar, this brown sugar, it's going to be measured different. It's going to be packed. So when you don't want to measure it like that, or you'll have an inaccurate measurement. So what you do is you just pack it down, and it's kind of like sand. So when I take it out, if I can get it out, it holds its shape. All right. So it's very different. And that's why it's really important that I showed you how to do that. So this is a packing sugar. All right. So I have my 2 tablespoons. All right. And then now I need my 2 teaspoons. Again, you're going to pack it. You don't want it to be overflowing, or else you're going to have an inaccurate measurement. You don't want that to happen. So baking is a true science, and every ingredient plays a key role. So if you over or under measure any ingredient or just leave it out, it's going to greatly affect your recipe. All right. So our brown sugar is done. All right. I'm just going to give my hands a quick rinse. I do have gloves available. I didn't put them on just because I'm making this at my home to demonstrate for you. If we were at school, we do provide the students gloves to use for every lab, especially with this pandemic. It's important that, we're gloved up. All right. So that is our brown sugar. All right. The next ingredient we are going to measure is a liquid ingredient called vanilla extract. All right. So vanilla extract, there's a bunch of different types of extract. Vanilla extract is the most common. And it is going to enhance the flavor of our product. All right. That's all it does. It literally just enhances the flavor of our product. Okay. Now it is a liquid ingredient. And we only need a ½ teaspoon. All right. So because it's such a small amount, we will use our ½ teaspoon measurement. If this was a large amount, like if we were measuring water or milk or something like that, we would use the liquid measuring cup. Okay. So this is a liquid measuring cup. These come in different forms. Okay. So here is a 2-ounce format. Which is essentially equivalent to a ¼ cup. This is a 1 cup increment. I have 2 cup increments, 4 cup increments, etc. So if you were going to measure a large amount, over like a spoonful, you would use of a liquid ingredient, you would use your liquid measuring cup. But because it is such a small amount, it's all right to use, we only need a half teaspoon. It's okay to use this. All right. So when you're measuring this, okay, I am going to just open up that vanilla. All right. And I'm going to pour over a cup just so it doesn't spill. Okay. Now this smells amazing. But if you put this on your tongue in its uncooked state, it's gonna burn. So a lot of times students are like, oh, it smells so good, I'm gonna taste it. And then it burns their tongue. So don't taste this by itself. It's not yummy. All right, so we have our half teaspoon. And what vanilla essentially is ethanol alcohol. And then it's soaked with vanilla bean, and that's how it gets all its flavor. So vanilla bean is a plant, and it extracts out all the flavor. And then we have our vanilla extract. All right, so that's our vanilla. The next ingredient we're going to use is salt. All right, so salt is used in all baked recipes, and it is a flavor enhancer. So it kind of balances out all the flavors. It's used in very small amounts, but if you don't add it, like if you forget it, it just changes the overall flavor of the product. So you really want salt. Like think about it. If you go to a restaurant and you order food and you sprinkle your food with some salt, it's going to make it taste a little better. Well, in baked products, it does the same. It kind of balances out all the flavors. So like I said, you only need a small amount. So we need a pinch, literally a pinch. So a pinch in terms of our measuring spoons doesn't exist, right? A pinch is literally like a quarter of a quarter teaspoon. So it's such a small amount, and it's just to kind of balance out the flavor of these cookie dough bites. Okay, so a pinch, I'm just putting my little pinch in there. You can barely even see it, and I literally use my pinch. Okay, the rest of it I'm just putting into my sink, and I'm good to go. Okay, the next ingredient, which is probably the most important, is all-purpose flour. All right, so all-purpose flour is the most common, hence the word all-purpose. All right, so you've probably seen flour before. All right, there, as we talked about yesterday, there are variations of flour. In this recipe, if you are gluten-free, you can substitute, because we're not baking these cookie dough bites, you can substitute gluten-free flour for the all-purpose flour and it'd be fine. You can pretty much substitute any of the flours in this specific recipe, but every recipe is going to be a little different. So, but in this recipe, you can substitute and use any of the flours, but I am using all-purpose. I would recommend, if you can have all-purpose and you have it in your home, then you should use all-purpose. All right. All right. So all-purpose flour is measured with dry measuring cups. Okay. So here is my dry measuring cups. It comes as a quarter cup, a third of a cup, a half cup, and then 1 cup. So this is a standard size, a standard set. All right. And when you measure dry ingredients like flour, I'm going to show you, we need a half cup. All right. So I'm going to take my half cup. All right. And I'm going to take a spoon. All right. And I'm going to measure this with a spoon right over. I'm just going to lightly place this in my half cup. Okay. Now I'm not packing it because I want it to be light and fluffy. Okay. Or I'll get too much of the flour, and flour adds structure. Okay. Too much of it will add too much structure, causing a dry product. Not adding enough will make it very weak and loose and not hold together. So I like to compare flour like it's the bones of a baked product. So if like, think of your body. If I took away all of your bones, your body would just turn to mush. So adding flour is like the bone of a baked product. Okay. So it's heaping right now. Heaping means I have extra, it's overflowing. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to level this out. Okay. Just like so. And now I have my half cup of flour, and I'm going to put that in my little container here. All right. And then the last ingredient that I'm going to add is the best ingredient, which is my chocolate chips. So the recipe calls for a quarter cup. All right. So here's my quarter cup and I'm using my dry quarter cup. Not a lot of liquid ingredients in this recipe, which is why we didn't really use the liquid measuring cup. Okay, so to do this, I don't need to spoon it. I can literally just press or just place my spoon in there, and I have my little baggie of chocolate chips, and then I'm going to place them right in my prepped container. All right, so now I have all of my ingredients mise en place, which means pre-measured. All right, so I have my chocolate chips, I have my salt. Chocolate chips is just a garnishment. It just adds extra flavor. My salt to kind of balance the flavors. I have my granulated and brown sugar to add flavor and sweetness to my product. I have my butter, which is going to add texture and richness. And I have my flour, which is my structure. And then I have my vanilla extract for flavor. All right, so I'm going to show you how to make the cookie dough bites now. All right, before I show you how to actually, we've mise en place, before I show you how to actually make the cookie dough bites, I do want to just talk about one thing on your recipe so you understand this overall. So on recipes, the way that ingredients are listed, so how it says butter, brown sugar, sugar, vanilla, salt, flour, and chocolate chips, this is the order that you're actually going to add and mix the ingredients. So sometimes students, they don't pre-read the recipe, or they don't have a demo like how I'm showing you, and they just add everything in the bowl, and then they wonder why it doesn't turn out. So it's important that the ingredients are added in the order that they are listed, and then that you are following the directions. So the first thing I'm going to do is cream the butter and the sugars together. All right, so that's my first step. I'll explain creaming as I show you. Then I will add in my vanilla extract, my salt, and I'll mix it until it's combined. After that's combined, now I have a really balanced playing field to incorporate my flour. It's really important that the flour is incorporated well, okay? Then I will add in my chocolate chips, and then I will portion, all right? So before you make anything in general, whether it be in these cookie dough bites or any food, it's really important that you read your recipe ahead of time so you're not wasting your time and your recipe always turns out. All right, so let's get started. So here's my mixing bowl. All right, and I have all my prepped ingredients. All right, what we're going to use, so there are some common mixing tools. We have what's called a rubber scraper. That's what I'm going to use. We have a wire whisk that's usually used for batters. And then we have a wooden spoon. You could also use a wooden spoon for that would be totally fine. If you're someone that has like a hand mixer at home, you could use that too. But it's super easy to make these cookie dough bites. So that's why we're going to mix it by hand using a rubber scraper. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to take my butter and my sugars, my granulated sugar. Okay. So butter adds the richness and texture. And then sugar adds flavor and sweetness. It also, if we were baking these, it also helps with browning. All right. So what you're going to do right now is we are creaming. Okay. What the heck does creaming mean? Creaming means to incorporate sugar into fat. Okay. And you make it one light and fluffy mixture. So what I like to do is I take my mixing bowl and I rotate it around to get all of that sugar incorporated into that fat. All right. Is it going to be perfect? No, but you want to make sure just that it's somewhat light and fluffy. And I rotate my bowl. So that's a little bit more comfortable as you're baking or mixing. Sometimes students are always like going like this, and that's fine, but you're really not getting into the ingredient. So it's really good to rotate your bowl and kind of smash and cream that all together. So you can kind of see the difference that all of that sugar pretty much has melted, creamed into my fat. All right. So now you don't want to see how I still have some sugar chunks. I'm just going to take a spoon and kind of scrape that off. I really want that sugar, those sugar chunks, to melt into cream. Same word. Essentially, creaming as the sugar is melting into the fat. I really want it to become one. Because when I eat these, or when you eat these, you don't want it to be like crunchy, and sugar sometimes could have that crunchy texture, especially because we're not baking these. Okay. All right, so there is my creamed mixture. The next thing I'm going to add is my salt, which is just a pinch. Remember, there's a lot of sugar in here, so the salt is going to break down on the sweetness, kind of balance out the flavors. All right, and then the next thing I'm going to add is my vanilla, and that is just going to add flavor. And it's actually, because it's a little bit of liquid, it's going to add a little bit of moisture as well. All right, so there wasn't a lot of those ingredients, so it's just going to take a minute to mix it well. Make sure it's combined, especially the salt, because you want to make sure it's distributed. Okay, and then we're good to go. Okay, the next ingredient we're going to add is our flour, 1/2 cup. Remember, this is our structure, so we gradually add that. So that means that I'm just going to add a little at a time. So sugar in its, flour in its raw state, it tastes very gritty. So you want to make sure that it's really well mixed, and that's why you're going to add it gradually. Okay, so see how I don't see any more of the flour powder. So now I'm ready to add more. If you added it all at once, you're going to end up, it won't be evenly mixed. It won't be nice and smooth like you want it to be. All right, so it's important, gradually, a little bit at a time. Not like a little sprinkle, like you can add a decent amount. You don't want it to take you an hour, but you get the idea. Okay, so just keep mixing. And you can probably tell that now we're forming a cookie dough, essentially. So what makes this edible is we're not adding egg, okay? If we were adding egg, you couldn't eat this. Egg has, it's a safety and sanitation hazard. It has salmonella. It could have salmonella bacteria. So egg is something that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, recommends that you do not eat raw. Okay, doesn't mean that people don't eat it raw, but they don't recommend that you eat it. So this is a safe edible cookie dough because we're not adding egg. All right, I'm going to add my last increment of the flour. All right, and then I'm just going to mix it. The last thing we're going to incorporate is our chocolate chips. All right, students sometimes when they've made these before, they say, I don't like regular milk chocolate chips. Can I add white chocolate chips? Of course. You could add anything. You could add sprinkles. You don't even have to add the chocolate chips if you don't want, but we wanted to make true cookie dough, so that's why we're adding the chocolate chips. All right, I'm just going to scrape this off, give it one more quick mix, and then we will be good to go. All right, so I'm just going to go around my bowl. You can see, so you're giving myself a nice arm workout. All right, there you go. So there is our dough. And then the last thing you'll add is your 1/4 cup and 2 tablespoons of chocolate chips. I actually, when I prepped, I had only added a 1/4 cup. So it's actually a 1/4 cup, 1/4 cup, and then 2 tablespoons. We don't want to dip ourselves with chocolate chips. I almost dipped myself. All right. So there are my chocolate chips. So a lot of chocolate chips. And then mix those up. So it says to fold. So fold means to go around the sides of the bowl and just lightly incorporate. All right. So it pretty much looks like cookie dough, but it's safe to eat at this point because I did not add that egg. And I incorporated all of that flour. All right. So the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to portion. All right. We're not baking these. Okay. I am going to portion them. Portion means I'm going to divide it into my 30 portions. So the yield says it's going to make 30 bite-sized cookie dough bites. Okay. So I just got a sheet pan, cooking baking sheet. I'm not baking them, but I just wanted something flat. And I put a piece of wax paper right on the top. You could essentially do this on a plate. It's just easier for me to do it on here. So what I'm going to do, it says to take 1 teaspoon increments. All right. So to do that, I'm just going to put my 1 teaspoon and then I'm just going to put the portion right on there. I'm not doing anything with it yet. So my suggestion to you is you're going to have about 30 portions of these. So kind of just divide up your portions. I'm just going to do a couple right now. like so. And the reason why you want to portion it first is you want all your bites to be about the same size. Quality and quantity is the key to making food for a bake shop, okay? Or making baked products. You want them all to look equal and the same. It's just more visually appealing to the eye, all right? So then what you're going to do is you're going to take your cookie dough bite and you're going to form it into an actual bite, all right? Just like so. All right, so I'm going to go through and do that. And then I'll have my little bites. So what the recipe now says to do is once you have all of your cookie dough bites that have been portioned and then rolled into your balls, you are going to refrigerate these for about 15 to 20 minutes. The reason why you want to refrigerate them is then they'll keep their shape. They won't be soft. Some other enhancements, and this is not in the recipe, but what I've seen people do with this is they'll take like the Hershey's shell, the chocolate syrup that hardens, and they kind of will drizzle this on the top. You could drizzle chocolate, just regular melted chocolate chips on the top, or you can just strictly eat them as so after they've been refrigerated. People love them. They're very tasty, and I hope you indulge if you have a chance at home. Thank you so much.